that lady, the social worker, she actually helped me to get transportation back and forth to the local university, and that's where I earned my GED. And knowing that, and that was something that really touched me, and it transformed me in a way that I really wanted to do better for myself and my child, and to have a better outcome, because otherwise I would have just ended up just giving up and not thinking I had any worth.
Welcome to the Kindness Factor podcast, sharing life-changing personal stories of the transformational impact of deep kindness. Hosted by
Dr. Elia, the happiness doctor,
and Randy McNeely, the kindness giver. Thank you for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to another episode of the Kindness Factor podcast. I'm Randy McNeely, known as the kindness giver. I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Dr. Elia Gourgouris, the happiness doctor. And we are so privileged today to have an amazing lady named Lisa Purtue here with us. And I want to tell you just a little bit about Lisa, because I say a little bit because there's a lot I could tell. But Lisa, right now, she's a licensed clinical substance abuse counselor, and she works for a company called ASP Services. And boy, I don't even know how to say that word, psychopharmacotherapy in West Allis, Wisconsin. She has a tremendously impressive educational background. She's got a degree in criminal justice and law enforcement. She's got a degree in substance abuse counseling. She's got a Bachelor of Science in psychology, as well as she's currently working on her master's degree in clinical mental health counseling at Mount Mary University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And there's a whole plethora of more stuff that we could talk about, but you know what? We're going to let Lisa share a little bit more about herself. But Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Because we're the Kindness Factor, we bring our guests in and we ask them to share with us some kind of transformative encounter that they've had with kindness, how kindness has blessed their lives, something that somebody did that has had a tremendous impact on you. Do you have a story you can share with us where someone did something for you that impacted you, that you still remember and still impacts you today?
Oh, absolutely. I'll start out from the beginning of being a homeless teenage mom. I was put out of my mother's car and she told me to get out, and she left me with a t-shirt and a pair of pants and a paper bag and dumped me off. And I ended up sleeping outside for a couple nights, and I ended up walking a couple blocks to social services building and meeting with a social worker because I didn't know what else to do. I only had like $40, that I used got from babysitting money. And
did you have your baby at that time?
Yeah, she was 6 months old.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I just turned 18 years old. I dropped out of school because I had to take care of this child. And this social worker, she said, I can help you get housing. I can help you get, food stamps and things like that. And when you go to the store and use food stamps, not a lot of merchants at that time were very nice about it. They'd actually walk me to another portion of the store and have me shop there. Begrudgingly, they were selling me rotten stuff that they were going to throw out anyway. And I used my food stamps on that. I ended up finding a little 1-bedroom like studio apartment, and the money that was helping me helped to pay for the rent. But that lady, the social worker, she actually helped me to get transportation back and forth to the local university, and that's where I earned my GED. And knowing that, and that was something that really touched me, and it transformed me in a way that I really wanted to do better for myself and my child, and to have a better outcome, because otherwise I would have just ended up just giving up and not thinking I had any worth. And so, I slowly got different jobs. I did have, I've gone through abusive relationships along the way. I've had to get restraining orders. I've been through a divorce. I almost ended up in another homeless shelter because of the violence that I was experiencing. And when you're a kid growing up and you see this, it becomes normalized in your life, and you think that's normal behavior for people to act the way that you are being treated, when actuality, that's not the way people actually treat each other. But because you're in this mindset, and this is a learned pattern from when I was younger, I attracted to people that treated me very badly. I ended up being in the printing business for 16 years and went all the way to where I was actually printing Playboy centerfolds. And I thought to myself, my father was an artist and he always wanted me to do something with my art and my talent. So I ended up in the print business, and I thought one day, I'm like, you know what? Nothing will make him happy for whatever I do. And I didn't want to go to my grave at that point in my life. And at that point, I already had 3 children. I ended up quitting that job because I didn't want my children to think, oh, Mom, she printed a really good Playboy centerfolds, and that's all I had to offer to the world. I didn't want to have my children think of me in that way. So then I decided to make a huge career direct change. I got divorced. I got to purchase my own little condo for me and my children, and switch jobs, and totally in a different direction of working with people, because I always loved working with people. Well, I went into corrections. And
That is a tough population to work with, even though if you like working with people, that is really, really tough. And I was going to ask you, from this very difficult background and really difficult life with, with abuse and rejection and so much pain and trauma. I mean, that's real trauma. You still had somebody that believed in you early on in your life. And you said that helped you and transformed you. How did you pay that forward? Like, how did because at some point I think you decided to choose you versus
yes,
choosing toxic people in your life, right?
yes,
And then you enter a very toxic environment, even though you love people.
hmm
Corrections facility, that's not the best place to, I mean, that's a tough place. And yet, and there's a lot of hopelessness there, right? As you know
right.
that. How did
Mhm.
you provide kindness and hope to those that seemingly society has forgotten and truly thrown away the key?
Well, that's a huge question to answer. Um, After I graduated from the academy class, we had 2 months of training, and I read a book along the way. It was called New Jack, and it was written by a journalist who spent 9 months in Sing Sing prison. And I thought, oh, I can do this job. It should be fine. What he didn't include in that book was all the trauma and the things that you're going to see and be exposed to. And I'm like, this was skimming the top of the surface for what I was going to experience. And you're thrown into this with these gentlemen, and I called them gentlemen from the get-go. And for me, in my mind, that is how I was able to show dignity and respect to the gentleman that I was supervising. My coworkers, I can't say much about them. They did not want to have women in corrections at the time, so they made it hell on wheels for me. But they locked me on a unit, and they thought it would be funny. I had no weapon, I had no radio, no nothing. And all the gentlemen on that unit were screaming and hollering to the top of their lungs, calling me every name in the book. And I'm looking around and I'm looking at the coworkers behind the glass, and they were all standing there laughing at me. And I'm thinking, oh, you ain't going to get the best of me. I said, this is scary, but you know what? I'm going to find the instigator. And so then I kind of started looking around and found a gentleman on the lower tier. And I walked up to him and I said, excuse me, sir, how are you doing today? And all of a sudden the noise started to quiet because they wanted to hear what I was had to say. And there was 50 people on that unit. And I said, how are you doing, sir? And he looked up at me through this dirty glass and he's like, you a tall glass of water, woman. And I said, so would you allow other people to scream and holler at let's say your mom or your daughter or your grandmother or female women in your life? And he looked at me and he said, oh, hell no, they would get a beat down, something of that nature. And I said, sir, you have a good day. And he says, are you going to be working our unit? And by this time it was quiet. You could only hear me and this young man having a conversation. And he asked me if I was going to be working on that unit. And I said, not today, sir. But I would never, I'm just letting you know, I would never treat you with any indignities or disrespect ever. I said, you have a good day. And I walked away, and then I pounded on the glass for them to open up the doors. And they opened up the doors. I walked in there, and all 5 of the gentlemen that were in there, they scurried out and left me in there with the sergeant. And I didn't say a word to him. All I said is, please give me the policy book on this unit.
Hello, I'm Randy McNeely, co-host of the Kindness Factor podcast and co-creator of the Kindness Factor Human Interest series. Thank you so much for listening. We sincerely appreciate you. So here's the question for you. Do the guests and the messages we're sharing resonate with you? If so, we'd like to invite you to join us in our efforts to spread love through kindness around the world. You can do so simply by visiting our Buzzsprout subscription page at the link listed in the description and taking out a monthly subscription. You can pay up to $10 per month. Your support will enable us to continue to deliver great content and to take our message to a much broader audience. Remember, with kindness, everybody wins. Thank you for your support.
And it seemed to be the talk of the whole institution that day, just by doing that.
It took us so much courage for you to do that. I mean, my gosh, with so much adversity, you were set up to fail, clearly. Totally set up to fail. And yet you chose respect and you chose humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's very touching, actually, honestly.
It's very touching. You think about that. You turned the tables on them.
Through kindness, though.
You totally turned the tables on them by simply being kind, by showing respect for that man and asking him to show the same respect for you. I mean, you didn't say, I expect you to show the same respect for me. What you did was put it in his court by saying, would you allow these guys to speak to your mother, your sister, your daughter like this? And as soon as you said that, he recognized the fact that you had respect, and the way you treated him, you showed respect for him. He knew that it was that you cared. He knew you cared.
Yeah.
The other guys listening, why did they become quiet? Because they knew you cared. Why did the guys in your office run out, the chickens?
Yes. Yes.
So what happened after that? I'm like very curious. You go back to this unit. You're the only woman, I'm assuming, right? And
yes, there was about 6 women, Caucasian women at this facility, and the majority of the population that were my coworkers and the gentleman that I had to supervise were African American. And this was in Milwaukee, downtown Milwaukee. It's a 9-story high-rise facility. And it was where I grew up. I grew up in Milwaukee, and I wanted to show everyone the respect that I would expect somebody to do, but doing it in a way that brought their attention to how can somebody be nice in this environment. I actually worked a total of almost a little over 7 years, and I did never use a swear word or any foul language towards any of the gentlemen that I worked with.
Randy shared with me a little bit about some story with a gentleman in a wheelchair that had issues with his legs and his feet or something. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
I love that story. Can you tell us that story and the outcome of that story? Because this is what going above and beyond the Call of Duty looks like. And this is what kindness and humanity looks like. Can you share that story with us in a little bit? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. I actually met this gentleman in the prison in Milwaukee in the 9-story high rise. And he had been shot at that time, and he still had the bullet lodged in his hip. And I had to call health services unit to let them know that this person was having a problem walking, and I didn't want him to fall because, of the harsh conditions that were there. A cement floor, and in the summer, that cement floor would sweat, so then the floors became very slippery. So I didn't want him to fall. So they took care of him, and he remembered that. Many years later, when I ended up being at another prison, he happened to be the same guy, happened to be dropped off on my unit, and they gave him a walker to walk with, and they threw all of his belongings and blankets on a table and walked off. Now, mind you, this gentleman came through intake. He was seen by a nurse. A nurse gave him this walker to walk on my unit. This gentleman, right away, I noticed something wrong with his legs. One was very inflamed and thick. It looked like almost 3 times the size as his other leg. His other leg looked very thin. And I said, good morning, sir. I said, can you have a seat over there? I'm going to make a phone call quick. So I called health services unit, and I said, I would like it if you could actually look at this man. He just was dropped off from intake. I noticed that he has one very enlarged leg and one very thin leg. And the nurse replied, well, maybe he has a fat leg and a thin leg. And I said, ma'am, if this man dies tonight in this cell from blood clots that I suspect he might have, it's going to be on you. Please tell me what your name is, because I have to log this. And then she said, fine, just send him up. We'll take a look. So I had him gently put into a wheelchair. And this unit that I worked on had 100 gentlemen. And I was the only officer on that unit at the time. And so then they put him in gently into this wheelchair. He took his walker with him, and I asked a unit worker if they could take him up to HSU. I had to hire 6 individuals to help me to run the unit because there were so many people on the unit. And I walked around with the gentleman. So he was taken up, and he was sent out to the hospital right away. And then I was called to the office from a captain. And this captain was kind of short, Napoleon-like. And he says, who the hell are you? And I'm like, what's going on? I don't understand the question. And he says, are you an EMT? Are you a nurse? Are you, what profession were you in before? And I said, I'm a mom. And if I see something, I'm going to report it. So this person had to be seen. and he stuck his finger in my face and he said, I'm going to give you an order. You stop calling HSU for these guys. And I said, well, as soon as you put it on paper, because I know the DOC 303, and I laid out the rules because I knew them better than he did, and human resources. So at that point, they started going after me. The men didn't want the female officers there, especially ones that are strong. So anyway, I would say about 2 months later, this gentleman was being wheeled down in the middle of the aisle. So I had about 100 gentlemen going out to rec on one side of the wall, and on the other side, I had gentlemen coming back from the library. And I was out there with a couple other officers, male officers. And lo and behold, somebody started screaming down the area where we had, it's like a big, huge hallway. And he was in a wheelchair and he started screaming and he's like, Miss P, you see that woman there? You guys better listen to her. She saved my life, not just once, but twice. And he started crying when he saw me. And he's being wheeled down by another unit worker. And as soon as he started coming closer to me, he was just yelling and hollering, thank you so much for what you did for me. And the male officers are like looking at me like, what did you do? And I'm standing there smiling, just being myself. And he comes up to me and he says, I wish I could hold your hand or give you a hug. And he said, but you saved my life. And he said, I had 7 blood clots in that leg and I would have died if it wasn't for you paying attention. And he says, I owe you my life, not once, but twice. And he just continued to cry as he's sharing this story with me. And because I advocated for the gentlemen on my unit, if they needed medical ID, if they could not write it out on a piece of paper to go to the dental, or I had another gentleman that had meth mouth and his whole face was just swollen. And I helped him write out a slip to see the dentist on a Monday. I was gone on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, my days off, came back on a Friday, and I didn't even recognize this man's face. He came walking up to me and it was in his eye, it was in his forehead. He couldn't even barely see through his eyes. And I'm thinking to myself, how many officers walked by him and didn't even pick up the phone to say, is this guy going to be seen or what? This man could have died from the infection that he had.
To me, it's like you've been an advocate to the voiceless.
You're voice to the voiceless.
Your voice to the voiceless. I know, and it's so beautiful that you actually like literally physically saved people's lives, and you transformed people that really nobody cares about them, and you cared in an environment where nobody truly cares, and you gave them hope, and you saved their lives. Your stories are like, I believe you, but they're unbelievable.
Yeah.
Because they're, and it's really an honor just to be in your presence. I sincerely mean that, because I don't know anybody who's worked in corrections before. So these are stories that are, they're not stories that we normally hear, but they're just as important because every life matters. Every life.
And that's the powerful message that's coming from these stories today. Every life matters.
Right.
No matter where you are. I love the way that you've constantly used the word gentleman.
Yes.
You see them for the human beings that they are. They've made mistakes, obviously, or they wouldn't be where they are.
Right.
But you still see them as human beings that have value and that they deserve to be appreciated. And because of the way, you think about that, the man that was yelling down the hall, because of the love and the kindness and the caring that you showed to him, he will never forget that. You'll never forget him. You'll never forget that experience. He'll never forget that experience.
Right.
You opened his heart through your kind actions and painted love there.
Yeah.
And,
And
you know, as our podcast is coming to an end, I want to ask you something because your experience is so unique, Lisa. Are there three gems or words of wisdom from your experience, whether you learned personal and professional, that you can share with our audience that would inspire them or it would help them in their own lives?
Yeah, three simple little nuggets, pearls of wisdom, like Elia says.
number one, just because somebody goes to jail doesn't mean it has to be a death sentence. You give yourself the grace to be kind to people that can never repay it back, but you're doing it out of your heart, because this person, just being there for somebody else is so important, especially when they're in a situation where they're very vulnerable in that in an institution, on a unit. They depend on you for their food, their clean clothing, their mail, their phone calls, their library time, their going outside and having rec time. It means a lot to me to be able to have been there to give, even though I'm not expecting anything back. I'm just expecting just to just make sure that this person is taken care of properly. Um, I got a lot of other stories.
Yeah.
What would be number three? What's your third pearl of wisdom?
My little pearl of wisdom: always stay humble.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us today. Thanks for all that you've shared with us. There's so much goodness. We could talk for a long time. I mean, because you've got so many degrees, you're working that way in order to be able to bless people's lives. And we just appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate you too.
You're welcome. You know what sticks with me? I mean, there's so many things, but what sticks with me is like do something for somebody else, and with the grace that you talked about, when they can't do anything back in return, and do it because it's the right thing to do, and do it because you're in a position to bless and to help somebody else's life. That to me is the most profound. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
We want to thank our audience for joining us today. We really appreciate you, no matter where you are. Thank you for taking the time to drop in. And if this resonated with you, if you appreciate what we're sharing, please remember to like and subscribe to all our social media channels and to share this with as many people as you can. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, remember that with kindness,
everybody wins.